Morning business, followed by debate on a bill to extend the expiring provisions of the USA PATRIOT Act anti-terrorism law. They have a procedural vote on that bill scheduled for 5 p.m. Eastern. Live coverage of the Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, source of enabling strength, sustain our senators, not only in the great moments, but also in the repetitive and common task of life. Establish their work, strengthening them to honor you by serving others. Lord, make them agents of healing and hope as they help people live in greater justice and peace. Empower them to daily develop greater respect and submission to your commands. Fill them with your life-giving spirit so that they will feel greater compassion for those on life's margins. We pray in your loving name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., May 23, 2011. To the Senate. Under provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Richard Blumenthal, a senator from the state of Connecticut, to perform the duties of the chair, son Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Following leader remarks, if any, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 3 p.m. today. During that period of time, senators will be allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each. At 3 p.m., the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to proceed to the PATRIOT Act. The time until 5 p.m. will equally divided and controlled, so at 5 o'clock there will be a roll call vote on the motion to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed to the PATRIOT Act. Mr. President, this will be a busy week in the Senate. We have to renew the PATRIOT Act. It's not a perfect law, but it plays an important role in keeping our country safe. We also have to reauthorize the FAA bill, Federal Aviation Administration. We all know what will be the focus of this week's biggest debate and biggest headlines. The primary conversation this week will be about the Republicans' plan to kill Medicare. People are talking a lot about that plan because there's a lot that people have to fear. The Republican plan would shatter a cornerstone of our society and would break our promise to the elderly and to the sick. It would turn our seniors' health to profit-hungry insurance companies. It would let bureaucrats decide what tests and treatments seniors get. And it would ask seniors to pay more for the health care in exchange for fewer benefits. That's a bad deal all around. So it's easy to understand why the American people don't support it. Democrats, Republicans, and independents do not support the plan to kill Medicare or to change it as we know it. I won't support it, and though the Republican House passed the Medicare killing plan almost unanimously, sometimes it's difficult to tell where Republican Party stands generally. We also saw how quickly one prominent Republican presidential candidate spun himself into circles last week. First, he called the plan for what it was, radical. He said it was right-wing social engineering. That's a quote. Hours later, after Republicans jumped all over him, he reversed course and said he supports the plan to kill Medicare. Remember, he said it's radical, it's right-wing social engineering, and suddenly he says it's okay. That is some real Interesting gymnastics. Another prominent Republican, one who serves in this body, has been all over the map as well. First, he said in his words, "Thank God for the Republican plan to kill Medicare." Direct quote. Then he said he was undecided. And now he says he opposes it. We'll tune in tomorrow or maybe this evening to see if he changes his mind again. Our Republican colleagues can't seem to believe the same thing today that they said yesterday. But when Democrats talk about Medicare, we still believe today the same thing we believed years ago, decades ago, generations ago. We believe in our responsibility to each other, and especially those in their golden years. 46 years ago, this summer, President Lyndon Johnson, a former majority leader of this body, signed Medicare into law. As he did so, he said the following, and I quote, "Few can see past the speeches and the political battles to the doctor over there that's tending the infirm, and to the hospital that is receiving those in anguish, or feel in their heart painful wrath at the injustice which denies the miracle of healing to the old and to the poor." End of quote. Those injustices don't exist like they used to because of Medicare, but they still exist. Potentially, they're still out there. The old and the poor among us still seek help and healing, and it is still our responsibility to act not on political impulses, but with human concern and compassion. It is still our responsibility not to be motivated by short-term politics, but to be moved by the people who need Medicare, the people who count on this safety net to keep them from poverty, illness, and worse, death. If we pay attention to those people, we'll notice something else also, Mr. President. While Republicans are tripping over themselves and trying to decide whether or not they want to kill Medicare, you know who hasn't changed their mind at all? The American people. We're on their side. They haven't wavered 1 inch. They've been as constant as Republicans have been erratic. They have been consistent and they've been clear. They don't want us to destroy their Medicare. Their Medicare. We owe it to them to listen. Would the chair announce the morning business?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 3 p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
I would note the absent quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. President.
The Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, request that proceedings under the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week, I was honored to participate in a very historic trip to attend the 7th ministerial meeting of the Arctic Council in Nuuk, Greenland. And I attended with Secretary of State Clinton as well as the Secretary of the Interior, Secretary Salazar. The Arctic Council was founded back in 1995, and it's an intergovernmental association. There's 8 member states within the territory that is contained within the Arctic Circle. The group includes Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, the Russian Federation, and of course the United States. There are also 6 permanent participants representing the indigenous people of the region. The trip was historic for a couple of reasons. First, it was the first time that a Secretary of State had led the United States delegation to the Arctic Council. And the fact that not only Secretary Clinton led it as the Secretary of State, but she was joined by a second Secretary, the Secretary of Interior, certainly made that historic. It was also the first time that a member of Congress had attended the Arctic Council meeting. We met with foreign ministers of the 8 Arctic Council nations and the representatives of indigenous groups to discuss issues that are related to Arctic governance, to climate change, environmental protection, and watched the ministers sign a historic search and rescue agreement. The Arctic Council also increased its organizational structure. They formed a standing secretariat that will be established in Tromsø, Norway, and they also established criteria for the admission of new observers to the Council. The People's Republic of China, Japan, Republic of Korea, Italy, and the European Union are all seeking observer status to the Arctic Council, which might cause some to wonder, why are all these non-Arctic nations interested in what is going on within the Arctic? And I think that just speaks to the evolving role of the Arctic in geopolitics in the world as we know it today. The Search and Rescue Agreement, the first ever legally binding agreement among Arctic states negotiated under the auspices of the Arctic Council, will strengthen the cooperation on search and rescue between Arctic states. As the Arctic sea ice decreases, maritime activities are clearly on the rise in the Arctic. Aviation traffic is also on the rise as we see new polar aviation routes cross the Arctic airspace in several different directions. But limited rescue resources, challenging weather conditions, and the remoteness of the area render the SAR operations difficult in the Arctic, making it so very, very important that we have this coordination amongst the Arctic nations. Now, under the agreement, on the U.S. side, the Coast Guard will be the lead federal agency for the search and rescue in the Arctic. And while we applaud the role that the Coast Guard plays historically, very long, distinguished history of operating and conducting rescues in the Arctic, the current status of the Coast Guard's service and aviation fleets makes conducting search and rescue operations in the Arctic very, very challenging. With the scheduled decommissioning of the Polar Sea, the Coast Guard will maintain only one heavy icebreaker in its fleet, and it's not expected to return to service until the year 2013. They're doing some work on that. And while the Coast Guard does have a medium endurance icebreaker, the Healy, the cutter is clearly not equipped to handle the thick multi-year ice that is present within the Arctic. On the aviation side of the Coast Guard operations, the Coast Guard C-130 aircraft stationed in Kodiak, Alaska, are the only aircraft in their inventory that are capable to make the direct flights to the Arctic. So just to kind of give you some sense of the scope, here's the map of the Arctic. The United States is up here, and everything is upside down, so I apologize for that, but that's the way the world is. Kodiak, the island off the southern part of the state here, Barrow here, this is where the air assets are stationed in Kodiak. So to get to any search and rescue operations in the Chukchi, in the Beaufort, off of Barrow or Prudhoe, It's over 900 miles. It's the same distance, Mr. President, as the distance between Washington, D.C. and Miami. So if there were an incident in Miami, the helicopters have to fly from Washington to get there to provide for the rescue. And given the often harsh weather conditions in the Arctic, combined with a lack of infrastructure to provide for any forward deployed basing of helicopters, the Coast Guard C-130s can possibly provide the search part of the rescue, but it's very difficult to get to the rescue side. This lack of maritime resources and shore-based infrastructure to protect our aviation resources places the Coast Guard and the United States in a difficult situation in the Arctic. And without concerted efforts and a focused policy for the Arctic, the United States and our Coast Guard are going to continue to be ill-equipped to conduct the search and the rescue operations that are going to become increasingly necessary as amounts of sea ice continue to diminish and the levels of Arctic maritime vessel traffic increase. As former Admiral Allen, the former Commandant of the Coast Guard, would say, you know, I can't discuss too much about climate change, but I can tell you that there is more sea, more open sea that I am responsible for in the Arctic. We're clearly seeing that. It's been projected that a seasonal ice-free Arctic Ocean was decades away, and that maritime shipping through the Northwest Passage, through the Northern Sea Route above Russia, and the direct transit across the Arctic Ocean were going to be few and far between. But last year, Russia sent a large ice-breaking bulk tanker through the Northern Sea Route and across the Arctic, carrying hydrocarbons bound for Asia. The Russian Federation has received 15 icebreaker escort requests to provide navigational support through the Northern Sea Route for this year. Compare that to last year, when they only had 3 requests. So you can see the level of commerce stepping up. Transit through the Northern Sea Route, or the Northeast Passage, as it's also called, cuts 5,000 miles and 8 days off of the Suez route between Europe and Asia. So you can see why other nations would have an interest in what's going on up there. If they can cut their transit time, it's money and an opportunity for them. Interest in the Arctic by both the general public, the media, the Arctic and the non-Arctic nations continues to grow for many, many reasons. The Arctic is a vast area. You can see from the map here, it is essentially 1/6 of the Earth's land mass. It has a population within the Arctic area. This red line, if you can see it, is essentially all of the Arctic nations. But the governments that are contained within the some 4 million people who live within this region, over 30 different indigenous peoples, dozens of languages. And while the land is clearly massive in size and relatively barren, it's not like Antarctica, where there are no indigenous people and no governance. The 8 Arctic nations are sovereign governments with laws that govern their land and their people. The Arctic holds clearly vast amounts of energy. We've known this for some time, but until recently, the resources of the Arctic were deemed to just be too difficult to access. They're covered with ice. They're difficult to access. They're expensive to develop. But with increasing access and high energy and mineral prices, the Arctic's wealth, which is estimated to contain approximately 22% of the world's remaining oil and gas reserves, 22% of the world's remaining oil and gas reserves within the Arctic area. Obviously, great interest. It is now being actively explored and developed. 6 of the 8 member nations of the Arctic Council are exploring or developing energy resources in their own waters. And this makes energy exploration perhaps among the more important and perhaps the most serious issues for Arctic policy as we move forward. This includes conventional oil and natural gas, but also the methane hydrates and some of the other less conventional forms. Offshore Alaska, We are expecting or estimating about 15 billion barrels of oil in a concentrated area of the Chukchi. So in this area, and then over in the Beaufort here, about 8 billion barrels. We have suffered serious delays in exploration, but I'm hopeful that we will see exploratory wells prove up this next summer. And while the United States Geologic Survey tells us that the region has the world's largest undiscovered oil and gas deposits, we also think that it holds huge amounts of other minerals like coal and nickel, copper, tungsten, lead, zinc, gold, silver, diamond, manganese, chromium, titanium. The potential there for the mineral resource is equally significant. But there's a natural and sometimes reflective tendency to question how in the world it can ever be safe or even economic to drill and produce in such a harsh, misunderstood, and clearly distant environment. But it is happening, Mr. President. It is happening today, and the technology and the engineering behind some of the existing and proposed activities is advancing rather rapidly. And while we struggle here in the United States to move ahead with offshore development in Alaska waters, our neighbors are rapidly moving forward on Arctic energy development. Russia, which is just 53 miles from Alaska's shoreline, is turning its eye to the Arctic's vast energy reserves as they are building the first offshore oil rig that can withstand temperatures as low as minus 50 degrees Celsius, and then heavy pack ice around it as well. And as their oil production is in decline, they're also reducing taxes and bureaucratic hurdles in order to encourage new oil development within the Arctic. Norway has been exploring and producing energy in the Arctic the longest of the Arctic nations. They have found the way, really led the way, for energy development and other activities like fisheries to coexist, and they also lead the world in developing technology to clean up oil in Arctic waters. Energy development as well as protection of the environment must go hand in hand. It's as simple as that. I was pleased that the Arctic Council announced the formation of a new task force that will negotiate measures for oil spill preparedness and response throughout the region. The decision to launch these negotiations is evidence of the strong commitment to proactively address emerging issues within the region and to create international protocols to prevent and clean up offshore oil spills in areas of the region that are becoming increasingly accessible to exploration because of a changing climate. Now, Mr. President, one question that I was asked seemingly everywhere that I went when I was in Greenland was, what is the United States position on the Law of the Sea Treaty? When is the Senate going to move on this? And the U.S. delegation reiterated their support for its ratification of the Convention of the Law of the Sea. I happen to believe that it is crucial that the United States be a party to this treaty rather than an outsider who hopes that our interests are not going to be damaged. Accession to the Convention would give current and future administrations both enhanced credibility and leverage in calling upon other nations to meet Convention responsibilities. And given the support for the treaty by Arctic nations and the drive to develop natural resources, the treaty will also provide the stability and the certainty that is vital for investment in our maritime commerce. I think it should be pointed out that the United States is the only Arctic nation that is not a party to the Law of the Sea Convention. The treaty was first submitted to the United States for approval back in 1994. It has not been approved yet. Canada and Denmark joined the treaty in 2003 and 2004, respectively. But until the United States accedes to the treaty, it cannot submit its data regarding the extent of its extended continental shelf to the Commission on the limits of the continental shelf established under the treaty. So without a Commission recommendation regarding such data, the legal foundation for ECS limits is much less certain than if the United States were part of the treaty.
Now, Russia submitted an extended continental shelf claim back in 2002 that would grant them 460,000 square miles of the Arctic Ocean's bottom resources. You can see the green here is Russia's extended continental shelf, but this lighter green is the area that Russia has submitted to the Commission. This is an area the size of the state of Texas, California, and Indiana combined. Now, Denmark and Canada are also anxious to establish their own claims in the Arctic. Norway's claim is currently under review by the Commission on the limits of the continental shelf. Now, according to the U.S. Arctic Research Commission, if the United States were to become a party to the treaty, we could lay claim to an area the size of the state of California. So if you look again, Alaska again up on the top, this area here is area that is within the United States EEZ, this 200-mile area. But this area here, an area, again, about the size of the state of California, is what our mapping indicates that we would be able to submit a claim to the Commission if we were party to the treaty. So this whole area, again, would be area that the United States would be able to claim. If we fail to accede to the treaty and we are sitting on the outside, we have no right to move forward with our claim. If we do not become a party to the treaty, our opportunity to make the claim and have the international community respect it diminishes considerably, as does our ability to challenge the claims of any other nation. Now, some have described the scenario in the Arctic as a race for resources or even an arms race. But I will tell you that after seeing the international cooperation at the Arctic Council, I believe that what we have is an opportunity. This should be a race for cooperation, a race for sustainable management within the Arctic. The Arctic offers a great opportunity to work collaboratively. It is one area where the Obama administration can highlight the international cooperation in the implementation of its U.S. foreign policy. And this, you think about what the administration is poised to do with the reset with Russia. I think the Arctic is a perfect area to do just that. So really, what does the future hold for the Arctic? I believe that the pace of change in the Arctic demands, absolutely demands, that greater attention be focused to the Arctic. And I will tell you, it was music to my ears to hear the Secretary of State acknowledge that the United States is an Arctic nation. We are an Arctic nation because of Alaska and its peoples. That was incredibly significant, not only as a United States citizen to hear that, but for the other Arctic nations to hear that statement from our Secretary of State. The implications of the dynamic, changing Arctic for U.S. security, economic, environmental, and political interests really depends on greater attention, greater energy, and greater focus on the Arctic itself. But it will take robust diplomacy and very likely recognition, as Secretary Clinton has reminded us, that the interests in the Arctic is not just limited to the 5 Arctic nations or the Arctic coastal states or even the 8 countries that make up the permanent members of the Arctic Council. It will take a level of cooperation, a level of collaboration to include the non-Arctic states as well. But I am pleased that ever so slowly the United States seems to be waking up to the fact that we are an Arctic nation and willing to take up the responsibilities as such. I'm confident that with the leadership of the members of Congress, the administration, and from the Arctic community at large, we can continue to highlight the strategic importance of the Arctic for the United States. I believe the Arctic Council meeting may be just the turning point for American leadership in the Arctic. With that, Mr. President, I thank you for your attention. I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alabama.
Mr. President, I ask that unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
And I would ask to speak in morning business.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'm deeply concerned by our growing financial crisis and really deeply angered by the failure of this Senate to take any meaningful steps to address it. And I'm going to announce steps that I will take to try to force this Senate to do its job, since our Democratic leaders seem determined to prevent the people's work from being done. As ranking member of the Budget Committee, I see quite plainly that the process that statutory act requires is not being followed at a time in which we've never faced a greater systemic long-term debt crisis as we face today. The Act calls for a budget to be produced by April 15th, the Budget Committee to have meetings by April 1st, and here we are and toward the end of May about to recess. We've not even had a hearing in the Budget Committee on the markup of a budget. Budgets, of course, are able to be passed by a simple majority in the Senate, and they've given the majority party in the Senate the opportunity, really the responsibility, to set forth their vision about the financial future of America, to set forth their priorities, how they would conduct the people's business. Now, we know the House of Representatives met that deadline. They passed a historic budget, but the United States Senate has not done so. All we've seen from Majority Leader Reid really are political games, cynical games, I hate to say, distractions and gimmicks to avoid confronting the fiscal nightmare we're now facing. How else can you explain why, in the middle of the crisis, Democratic leaders have not even produced a budget, have not even allowed the committee to meet to work on one? We haven't even met to mark up one. We are required by law to produce a budget in committee and to pass that budget on to the Senate floor, but this process has been shut down. We have not produced a budget in 754 days. Let me repeat. This great Senate, in a time of financial stress and danger, has not passed a budget in 754 days and has, it appears, no intention of doing one this year. Today, I join with the newest member of our Budget Committee, Senator Kelly Ayotte of New Hampshire, to send a letter to Senator Reid, signed by every Republican senator in the Senate, pressing him to finally allow the Senate to begin work on a budget. But we are told in the media that the Democrats' refusal to put forth a budget is just good strategy, that it's best that they avoid putting a plan on paper. Here's an excerpt from a recent article in the Wall Street Journal. Fittingly, the article is entitled, "Democrats Unhurried in Work on Budget." I'd say that's true. This is what the article said, quote, "As a political matter, the Democratic strategists say," and the reporters talked to the Democratic strategists, staffers no doubt, "the Democratic strategists say there may be little benefit in producing a budget that would inevitably include unpopular items. Many Democrats believe a recent House GOP proposal to overhaul Medicare is proving to be unpopular and has given Democrats a political advantage. They are loath to give up that advantage by proposing higher taxes. Senate Democrats plan to hold a vote on the Ryan plan, hoping to force GOP senators to cast a vote on the Medicare overhaul that could prove politically difficult. Now, this is astonishing. Is it the position of the great Democratic Party that their vision for deficit reduction is so unpopular or unfeasible that they won't even articulate it in public, let alone offer it up as a budget? The heads of the Fiscal Commission warned, this was the commission President Obama appointed, they warned an economic crisis may be just 1 year or two away. That was a testimony they gave us in committee. Could be a year, a little sooner or a little later, said Erskine Bowles, chairman of the Debt Commission, along with Alan Simpson, who said it could be 1 year. In his opinion, we could have a debt crisis. Not a little warning from people who spent months hearing witnesses and studying the debt situation facing our country. But it appears that the leaders of the Senate would prefer to hide in the hills and take shots at Republicans from the distance. Is that what they prefer? Chairman Paul Ryan and the House GOP have put forward a plan to get this country out of a looming Greek-like debt crisis, make our economy more competitive, save Medicare for future generations. It's an honest, courageous plan that will improve the quality of life for millions of Americans and do the job, short-term and long-term. It may not be perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm saying it's a serious plan, seriously considered, that confronts both long-term and short-term problems and reforms Medicare and puts it on a path to salvation. But all we hear is attacks. By contrast, the budget that the President sent forward doubles our national debt and puts our entire country at risk, even though the President promised it would, quote, not add more to the debt, close quote, and have us live within our means, close quote. Those were the President's words. And I have to say, in the 10 years of his budget, analyzed by the objective Congressional Budget Office, they tell us that the lowest single annual deficit out of those 10 would be $740 billion. A stunning amount. They would average almost $1 trillion. In the last years, 8, 9, and 10 of his 10 years budget don't show the debt going down, but going back up to $1 trillion. It was the most irresponsible budget, I do believe, ever been presented to this nation. It's a stunning failure to lead at a time of financial crisis. It doubled the debt. It increased the debt over the projections of our baseline as it is. Instead of helping, it made it worse because it raised taxes and raised spending, and it raised spending more than it raised taxes. So where do our colleagues in the Senate stand? They refuse to put forward their own plan. Last week, Senate Majority Leader Reid said the Democrats don't need a budget. Quote, there's no need to have a Democratic budget, in my opinion, close quote. He said it would be foolish to present one. Well, the only thing that's foolish is violating the Congressional Budget Act in such a cynical attempt for political gain. The decision not to produce a budget is not a decision based on what's best for our country, but based, as you could see from the quotes of the staffers and actually Senator Reid's own quote, it was designed for political advantage. The House, the Ryan budget, is honest. And if anybody confronts the budget situation in an honest way, they know your budget is going to have some bad news. It's going to have to tell people that things can't continue as they are today, but we're going to have to do better. We're going to have to reduce spending. So maybe for some people that's not popular. So isn't that what we're paid to do here, is serve the national interest, tell the truth about what's happening in our country? So we find ourselves in the remarkable position this week of having Senate Democrat leaders bring forward not a Senate budget, but to bring forward the House Republican budget, only to vote it down while offering no alternative of their own. What a cynical ploy. Think about it. Senator Reid said, well, we're going to bring up the House budget, and we're going to vote on it, and every member of his caucus, I'm sure he's already counted the heads, will vote no, and it has no chance of passage. What good is that? The Senate has a statutory duty under the Budget Act to produce a budget. We've not even attempted to produce a budget. So they'll attempt to bring forward a budget that they have no intention of working on, no intention of taking seriously, no intention of opening for amendment or discussion, and only one goal, to use their majority to vote it down. Well, I look forward to the chance to support the House budget. I look forward to casting a vote which says we will be getting our spending under control, that we will deal honestly with our budget challenges, short and long term. I look forward to voting for a budget that creates jobs, makes us more competitive, for a budget that creates jobs, makes us more competitive, and deals honestly with the debt threats that we have. But let's look at the bigger picture this week. The planned series of votes are designed by the majority leader to fail, of course. Designed as a gimmick to distract attention from the Senate's failure to produce an honest plan. They're designed to keep this Senate from doing its job, really, and defending this republic from grave financial danger. So I, therefore, will not provide unanimous consent for any prearranged package of votes doomed to fail, intended to fail. Anyone can call up these budget votes consistent with the rules anytime they wish, but a package deal that wastes the Senate's time, I cannot and will not support. The majority leader is wasting the American people's time. I am here to speak honestly and just tell the truth about that. That's the plain fact. It's a political gimmick that's going on. And further, I will not agree to unanimous consent on any motion to adjourn for the Memorial Day recess. If we're going to close down this chamber for another week without having produced a budget, without having even scheduled a committee hearing, then I'm going to require that we have a vote on it. Let's vote to go home, not having done the people's business. Paul Ryan is leading. Speaker Boehner is leading. The House Republicans are leading. They produced a document that can be defended, that has integrity, that deals with our short-term spending problem and our long-term spending problem. It's not perfect, of course. We have the opportunity to amend it. We have an opportunity to pass a budget of our own that might be different, but it will get us off the unsustainable path we are on. I can tell you that. It will do that. But our Democratic leader and the Democrats who control the chamber, who asked for the job, asked to be given leadership in the Senate, are refusing to allow a budget to go forward. They are refusing to share with the American people the contents of the plan they say they have behind closed doors. They say they've got one. You read in the paper they've got one. Well, why don't we see it? So on Memorial Day, a week from today, we honor those who have fallen serving their country. We honor the brave men and women who have risked and given everything for our freedom and our future. We truly do. We honor those who gave their last breath to preserve our way of life. But now that way of life is threatened by a tidal wave of debt that we refuse to confront. It is a debt we have created, that we are growing, and that is up to us to stop, to defeat. That the Senate would go into recess this week, refusing to work on a budget or even hold a public meeting on it, public hearing on it, is unthinkable. Our soldiers serving overseas will not get the next week off. Why should the Senate get a week off after failing miserably to do its job? So my message to the majority leader is simple. If you object to the House GOP plan or to other Republican plans, then you must come forward with your own honest plan to prevent financial catastrophe and create a more prosperous future. Indeed, Mr. President, I would close with this quote from the preamble to the Fiscal Commission report. This was a bipartisan commission created last year, appointed and called into being at the request of President Obama. He appointed the chairman, and Erskine Bowles, and Senator Alan Simpson was the co-chairman. And this is what they said in their preamble. This is what the commission said in their preamble, because they anticipated just this kind of political difficulty. They anticipated that politicians in our country would do exactly what they're doing in the United States Senate, not what they did in the House, where they faced up to their responsibility, but in the Senate. This is the quote. In the weeks and months to come, countless advocacy groups and special interests will try mightily through expensive, dramatic, and heart-wrenching media assaults to exempt themselves from shared sacrifice and common purpose. The national interest, not special interest, must prevail. We urge leaders and citizens with principled concern about any of our recommendations to follow what we call the Becerra rule. Quote, don't shoot down an idea without offering a better idea in its place. Close quote. Erskine Bowles, Chief of Staff to President Clinton. Alan Simpson, one of the more respected members to serve in the United States Senate. That's the Bipartisan Debt Commission's challenge. Don't shoot down somebody else's idea without offering a better idea in its place. So that's exactly what the majority leader plans to do. We don't need a Democratic budget, he said. It'd be foolish for us to produce one. We'll just call up this House budget and we'll attack it, and with our Senate majority, we'll vote it down, but we won't produce our own. We won't produce any other alternative. We won't tell the American people what our vision is, what our prospects and plans are for getting this country off the unsustainable debt path we're on and onto the path of prosperity and job creation and sound financial future. Why don't we hear it? Because, as one of their staff members said in that comment to the press, it might cause somebody to object. We might have, as the Debt Commission warned, advocacy groups and special interests who are going to rise up and complain about anything that reduces a dime that they receive. I don't deny an honest budget at this point in history where 40 cents of every dollar we spend is borrowed. We're going to have to reduce some spending. And some good people are going to really feel it. And it's not going to be easy, just like the Debt Commission told us. Don't we know that? I thought that was what the past election was last fall, when the big spenders and the high-tax guys got shellacked. I thought Congress would get the message. Apparently we haven't.